right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast. You get to listen to the sweet, sweet voice of me hosting it today instead of Jordan. He was a little too strapped up this week to join us, but we got Zach back from New York City with us here today. How are you today, Zach?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I was thinking about it this afternoon. I think it's been probably close to a month since the last time I've been on. So it's nice to be back.
Yeah, you just slipping by, hey, and not doing any work.
I'm not doing any work on the podcast, but school keeps me pretty busy.
Oh yeah. That's good. Yeah, I've been pretty busy with school and my new role and enjoying it and having a lot of fun at it and then coaching rugby, playing rugby. It's been a lot of fun. Luckily haven't gotten too hurt yet this year. I'll knock on some wood there just to make sure it doesn't happen this Friday when I'm playing. But yeah, let's get into it here, Zach. We'll get into the quick question of the week and then do our insiders and headliners. So, um, Zach, quick question of the week. Who is a player that finished top 12 in their position last season that you believe will fall out of the top 12?
Well, I'm going to do a bit of a cheat here, if you will. I am picking two players. I am picking the Chicago wide receivers. So last season, in half point scoring leagues, both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen finished inside of the top 12 for wide receivers. Now, granted, Keenan Allen wasn't in Chicago at that time. He was in with the Chargers, but now that they're both in Chicago, I am going to say that both of them are going to fall out of that top 12 ranking. And that's not to say that they're not going to have great seasons. I do think they're going to both have quite successful seasons. But I think two things in play here, and both are rookie playmakers. One being Caleb Williams. Now, I know you can make the argument that maybe Caleb Williams is a marked improvement over Fields at the quarterback position. And at least in terms of a passer, you won't get much of a disagreement from me. But another factor that we need to consider is the two of them coming together. And then also the new rookie wide receiver in Chicago. So that's three playmakers in Chicago, whereas last year there just would have been DJ Moore. So I think there's a very real possibility where both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen fall out of the top 12.
I saw you put that on there, and I thought about putting in the Chicago wide receivers as well, actually, but I was too much of a coward because of their pass that those two receivers are both elite receivers, and but you make a very valid argument, and you know what, yeah, like even if the QB is better in Caleb Williams, it's not that he's supporting just DJ Moore. He has to support both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and then hopefully help break out Roma Dunze as well. So it's just a lot of mouths to feed. It's hard to imagine if this offense is humming, them having two top 12 wide receivers in that room, but especially with their rookie QB who's going to take some lumps. Like it's hard to come out like CJ Stroud did last year and do that again. But if anyone's going to do it, it could be Caleb Williams. But I also saw in the docket you had the Texans wide receivers and then erased them, and that those guys I was also thinking about as well. But again, I was too much of a coward to do it. But I think that one would be pretty tough for them to repeat. But I really like Nico Collins. I like what he does, and I'm rooting for them. So it was hard for me to say that one as well. For my player that I think is not going to finish in the top 12 that did last year, I went with Raheem Mostert. He finished RB2 last year. Believe it or not. I actually was shocked when I looked and saw that he finished RB2 because I had kind of forgotten about the season he had. But I guess kind of a fairly quiet season for an RB2 in fantasy football, but he did it, and I don't doubt that Mostert has the talent, but this is, I think, one of the few times where he's finished that high and played pretty much a whole season uninjured. You got to imagine A-Chain's coming back. They drafted another running back to go into that room that fits into their mold quite well of what they want to do in Miami. So now it's not just a two-headed monster and Mostert and A-Chain, where you could see potentially Mostert still having a top 12 finish. But if they start to get their rookie RB some touches and manufacturing him some looks as well, then it's going to be a three-headed monster of Mostert, A-Chain, and I think it was right? Right was
Yeah.
the rookie RB. And that is just not something you want to be investing in, I don't think. So I would say clear of Mostert at a premium RB value, which I don't think he's getting drafted there anyways, but there's that explosive ability, but it's too hard to gauge, and any of those guys could go down with injury, and if any of them are, it's probably going to be Mostert, then probably A Chain, and then right.
I think you kind of nailed it on the head there. Very quiet year. Looking at his stats here, he had the second fewest rushing attempts out of the top 12 running backs. Had just over 1,000 yards on the ground. What really propped him up there was the 18 touchdowns on the ground and the 3 touchdowns through the air. Like I think 18 touchdowns for any player would be, easily a career year. So definitely see some regression in that area, especially if they do seem to lean more on A-Chain.
Yeah, and you got to think like some of those red zone touches will be stolen with a healthy A chain end right there. Right's a bit bigger than the other two, I believe, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so right could be the de facto red zone back that they're looking for, and then Mostert and A chain have between the 20s kind of thing. Moving on to our weekly insiders and headliners here. It's official. It's finally official after all this guessing. Will he? Won't he? Darren Waller finally announces his retirement. Zach, you want to say some words about Waller's retirement party here?
Um, Didn't get to watch him too much as a player. Him not really playing, at least when he was like a star playing a team that the Pats would see too often. But a really interesting career. Entered the league as a wide receiver, dealt with some substance abuse issues, and kind of turned it around as a tight end, I believe, or entered as a wide receiver, I believe, and then turned it around as a tight end. Now, last year the Giants gave up a third round draft pick to get him. He had a fine year, 52 receptions, 552 yards, but nothing too spectacular. And I think when you invest that kind of capital into a veteran player, you kind of expect more to that for 1 year, and then several years going forward. And for him to just have that 1 year on the Giants, it's probably a bit of a letdown to them and to their fans.
Yeah, pretty big letdown that happened. Feel bad for the guy though. Like sounds like injuries is what's leading to his early retirement here and exit from the NFL. So wish him all the best, and I'm glad that he persevered through the hiccups he had early in his career and was able to get his back on track there, and hopefully he's able to continue that. I know sometimes after having to suddenly retire due to not being able to perform anymore because of your injuries, that could take a guy to a dark place. And just hoping him all the best in his retirement here, and that he's able to live a healthy rest of his life. Moving on, Justin Jefferson got paid, which is huge for me as a Viking fan. I might I he he deserves it. He deserves every penny. I think he's the best receiver in the league. I may be a little biased, but you know what? It makes sense, especially right now with not having much invested in the QB position to pay Jefferson now, and then when it comes time to pay JJ McCarthy potentially in the future, hopefully it the money and the salary cap has expanded enough, and the money and inflation has kind of made that Jefferson payday look a little bit smaller on the books, and we can have both JJ and JJ for the long term of this great franchise of the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah, I don't hate it. I know some people were hating on paying him so much, but I think it just makes sense with the construction of the team as is. Zach, do you have anything to add to it, or?
Well, I think obviously you hit a few points there really well. Paying the star skill players around your rookie quarterback, kind of marrying them together for the foreseeable future is just good business, I think, and taking advantage of that rookie salary for the quarterback. One funny thing I did see though was the comparison between his contract being the highest salary or highest guaranteed salary for any skill player in the NFL outside of the quarterback position, and they compared it to the Jordan Poole contract from the NBA, where you have like a rotation player making more money than like the absolute best wide receiver in the NFL. So I thought that was funny, just the difference between the leagues there and how they pay their players.
Yeah, that is kind of funny, eh? I guess NBA, they don't have as many guys to pay. They don't have to finagle the finances quite as much. So moving on to our main part of today's episode, we decided to do a little keep trade cut for you. So, it's our version of Marry F and Kill, keep trade cut. So we give three players each, and we decide whether we want to keep them, trade them, or cut them from our team. So. We usually go at this from a dynasty perspective when we're talking about it. Um, but you know what? We could throw some redraft perspective in there as well if we want. If it's getting a little too hard to make the decision. What do you think, Zach?
Works for me.
Okay. Zach, I'll let you go first with your three, and I'll let you know what I think, and then you can tell me where you had them.
All right, cool. So the first three players that I had here for keep trade cut were all tight ends, and they're all being drafted in a very similar spot in half point leagues and in redraft leagues. Um, so I have Trey McBride, who is coming off the board at 45 overall, Mark Andrews 50 overall, and Dalton Kincaid at 53 overall. So these are tight ends number 3, 4, and 5 coming off the board after Kelsey and Laporta.
All right. So, if I'm going dynasty perspective here, I am keeping Dalton Kincaid. I am trading Trey McBride, and I am cutting Mark Andrews. And it is tough to say that. You made this one a good one because like who would want to cut Mark Andrews, any of these three guys from their dynasty league because of the potential for this year or the next years to come. My reasoning behind it, I went with the guy who's going to get me the most trade value right now, I think is Trey McBride. You could argue maybe Mark Andrews might fetch you a little bit more, but there's a lot of hype around McBride this season. He broke out last season, and everybody's looking for that next great tight end. He was a great, had a great profile coming out of college, and he looked like he'd be a great tight end, and he's kind of hitting the right trajectory, and just in that tight end market, yeah, I'd say trade. Trey McBride, and then keeping Dalton Kincaid because he's going to provide me the most future value, I believe. And then you also think about like what's going on in Buffalo with Stephon Diggs gone now. Who's going to get those targets? Well, Dalton Kincaid could pick up some of that slack. I'm not saying he's going to take all of Diggs' targets, but he could benefit definitely from Diggs being gone and an uptick of targets. A certain percentage of those will definitely go to Kincaid, I believe, and he was good as a rookie. So I think the sky's the limit for him, and he could end up being more valuable than McBride later on. But currently, as you can tell by their ADP, not quite as hyped up as McBride is yet. And then Andrews, just he's the eldest statement, so if you're going to trade him, it has to be to the right climate, to a guy competing for it right now. You're not going to, so like half your league is out of the conversation almost at that point when you're trying to trade Andrew. So it might be a bit harder to find a suitor than it would be for trying to trade McBride.
That, I think we agree on Kincaid. I'm definitely keeping Kincaid. Um, I like him the most, certainly from a dynasty perspective, given his age and the team that he's with, and the current structure of that team, especially with the quarterback position. However, I might flip McBride and Andrews. I think Andrews has, he's proven it. He's shown that he can do it year after year. Is surrounded by a good supporting cast, so I think teams would value that. Um, and I've been in the position where on a dynasty roster, I had him and he won me a league. He caught fire and he won me a league. And then I've also been on the position where had him, he got hurt, and that was kind of the end of a pretty successful season. And with McBride, I do think he is getting a lot of hype, and understandably so, especially after the ending to last season. But Arizona went out and they got a generational wide receiver prospect. So I wonder if a lot of the targets and production that McBride got at the end of last year was, maybe not as much to do about what he can do year after year, but just who else was there around him at that time, almost force feeding him targets. Now they have Harrison. Now he might not get as many targets. But all three really good players, all three players that I would be happy to have on either a dynasty or a redraft roster. While you were sharing your piece there, Armand, I just quickly scanned through their ages. Surprisingly, a lot closer in age than I thought. Andrews is turning 29 at the start of the season,
Okay, okay.
and McBride and Kincaid are both turning 25 at the start of the season. Kincaid and McBride both did junior college before going to their like the last school that they were at. So I think that might have added an extra year, kind of on their college year or two on their college career. So I was surprised at how close they are in age.
Yeah, that is actually surprising. And then you consider Kyle Pitts is younger than both of them still, and he's in his going into his fourth year in the league.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. And you know what? Like this conversation gets me excited for the tight ends this season because we've had so many years now of like the tight end just being this barren landscape of if you don't get one of the top two or three guys, maybe even just if you don't get Kelsey, you're screwed, right? But I think it's gonna be getting closer this year, and that gap is closing. And there's a number of good tight ends that are starting to break out now, and it's getting more exciting to see. And I am excited for it. You don't have to necessarily if you want a good tight end, you don't necessarily have to reach for him as much this year in your redraft leagues. So I went with three wide receivers, and they're back to back to back in their ADP for wide receivers, but not quite back to back to back in full ADP. But I went with Chris Olave at an ADP of 17, Drake London at an ADP of 18, and Nico Collins at an ADP of 21.
Well, this one's quite interesting, and I think a lot of this has to do as much to do with the players themselves as with the players around them. You look at Olave being first off the board there. He's kind of it there in New Orleans. But then you have to look at the quarterback, and it's Derek Carr. You got to ask yourself, is that kind of who you want to tie your horse to, or do you just kind of want to push the chips in and walk away? London has kind of been maybe a disappointment to this point in his career. Certainly not the caliber of player that I think a lot of us thought he would be at this point. And then you do have to consider they did bring in a definite upgrade at the quarterback position with Cousins, but then is Cousins going to be healthy to start the year? What does that look like? If he's not healthy, then he has a rookie quarterback. So some questions there. And then Collins, I think really benefited from uh, Tank Dell and his unfortunate injury, and then them bringing in Diggs as well kind of gives a murky situation around Collins, but Collins certainly has the best quarterback of the bunch. So I think I would likely keep Olave, cut London, and then I would capitalize on Collins and how he finished last year. You can maybe talk about that contract that he just signed. Like, hey, look, they invested in this guy. He's going to be part of their plan, part of their future. So I would keep Olave, cut London, and trade Collins.
Oh, I I like the way you analysis your analysis of that one. Sorry, stumbling over some words there. But yeah, when you look at it like talent wise, I would say Olave is the most talented of that group. Then I'd put Collins actually, and I was never a huge London fan. I don't know if his game really translates great to the NFL. You can't really separate that well. At least from what I've watched of him and seen of him when in his highlights and his play. It's usually a contested catch is what his highlight is. And that just kind of to me, that kind of puts you in a box of just being a jump ball guy for moving the chains or uh or getting a touchdown in the red zone, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You have a role, but that's not an alpha wide receiver in my mind. That's just a good NFL wide receiver. Whereas Olave has the tools to be an alpha. Collins has the athleticism to be an alpha, and is putting the tools together and showed that a little bit last year. So I'm with you with cutting London because of that. And I am actually agreeing with you completely because even though Derek Carr isn't the greatest QB, he has had wide receivers with decent fantasy seasons. Devontae Adams, his first year with him, still had a really good fantasy season. Not Devontae Adams' best season, obviously, but it was still a Devontae Adams season that nobody was upset about, compared to especially last year for him. So I think he can produce that for Olave, especially seeing as Olave is the only guy there. So it's not like he's going to be spreading the ball around too much. And offensively, I could see them even trying to manufacture more touches for Olave. And then trading Collins, capitalizing on the big year that he had, finally breaking out and using that to my advantage and like you said there's a little bit more competition there even though he does have the best QB. I'm a fan of Collins, so I'm really hoping that he becomes the alpha in that receiving room there. He's got the athleticism for it, the body type for it. It's just a matter of how much are they going to actually how big of a leash is Diggs going to have and is Tank Dell gonna continue what he was doing last season as well? But yeah, end up agreeing with you completely, Zach, even though there's a few little details I disagreed with.
Fair enough.
All
All right.
right, Zach, your next one here.
Yeah, so this one, I went with the running back position, and really, really interesting. All three of these players go in consecutive order, 12, 13, 14 off the board. These are players that if you're picking at the end of your end of round one, you can potentially snag both of these guys at that 1-2 turn, or two out of these three guys at that 1-2 turn in redraft leagues. And they are Jamar Gibbs, 12 overall, JT Jonathan Taylor, 13 overall, and Saquon Barkley, 14 overall.
All right. This is a good one, and it's three guys that are very different stages of their career. You got the Barkley is a vet now for sure. Taylor is played a few seasons. He knows what he's doing, and Gibbs is the young guy here. I like it. I think I am. That I might be hot here. I don't know. You'll have to tell me when you tell me yours. I am cutting JT, trading Jameer Gibbs, and keeping Saquon.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The reasoning behind it, let's see if I stay consistent here in my reasoning. So, JT coming off that injury, he's a guy who relies so much on his speed, and he's had injury problems the last 2 seasons. Is he gonna have that speed still? Is he gonna be lightning fast? And then he also has to contend with the fact that his starting QB is Anthony Richardson, who is a running quarterback as well. Sometimes can go well for you, sometimes can go not so well, depending on your efficiency and your other tools at your disposal. But we know JT isn't really a catch guy, so he's not going to get any scramble, hit him in the flats, just trying to get the ball to somebody. Throws, he's going to be more getting those first and second down runs. Um, and then you look at Jameer Gibbs and what he did last year. He's a young RB. He exploded onto the scene. He's really efficient. He can catch. He can run. He can do it all. I think you're gonna fetch a pretty penny for that. So in the dynasty community, I know it might be tough to sell that guy, but sell him and take a fortune for him, because I think you could at this point yet. I don't know how much more his value could increase. It could, but it might not yet. Saquon, I'm saying keep, because he just signed a new contract. You might as well ride him with the Eagles for a year or two. How long is the contract again, Zach? I forget.
I
Um,
want to say maybe it was a 2-year deal,
all
but
right,
we got the internet here. We can figure that out pretty quick. Three
all right,
years, 37.75 million.
3 years. So here's my asterisk with it. You use him for a year for sure, maybe 2 years, and then you trade him. Okay. So you're keeping Saquon for now because of that new deal. You know he has that role there. And a guy like that, he's gonna continue to get the workhorse load. He's gone through injuries and is still the same Saquon that we know and love from before. He can catch the ball, he can run the ball. He's thicker too, like he's a thick boy. So I think recovering from those injuries is a little bit better than what JT can do. And with this new offense at the Eagles, we saw what DeAndre Swift did last year at the beginning of the year, and then he kind of tapered off. But I Saquon Barkley is a far superior running back. He is going to have so many holes because of Jalen Hurts' legs. But the thing is like when you look at Jalen Hurts, yeah, he gets those rushing touchdowns in the red zone, but Philadelphia was starting to play around with that a bit last year, adding some deception to the brotherly shove and stuff like that. Or imagine even Saquon, because I think Saquon's done a decent amount of wildcat in his day, going under center to take that snap on the brotherly shove as well. So I think they could get creative there. So it's not going to eat into his touchdowns too much, but he's also going to get catches because Jalen Hurts, he may have legs, he may move, but he doesn't do that much actual rushing, I don't think. Just trying to think back to it. I don't remember his rushing stats, but it's not an extreme amount. He gets his fantasy points through the touchdowns in the red zone, not through running with his legs. So that's why I'm keeping Barkley.
Well, you made some really good points there, and you definitely swayed me a little bit. But I think I'm going to stay true with my rankings that I had going in. I would like to keep Gibbs, trade Barkley, and then I'm going to cut Taylor. I liked what you said there with Gibbs and how high his value is and the potential haul that you could get back. But I think with a running back, especially, I don't know how much more value you could realistically get um, for him. Like for example, you get 2 first-round draft picks. Is the likelihood of you getting a player better, 2 players better even than Gibbs? I don't know. So probably just going to stick with him. I like him. He's the youngest. He can contribute pass game, run game. I like that a lot. Keep trading Barkley in a really good situation there. Probably one of, if not the best offensive lines. Has a rushing quarterback, like you mentioned. But with Kelsey retiring, who's to say what's going to happen with that brotherly shove? And then with JT, they would have most likely the weakest of the 3 offensive lines. JT, his injury history concerns me greatly, and they also have a very run first, rush heavy quarterback, and he's somebody that I think could definitely take some red zone and some goal line opportunities. So keep Gibbs, trade Barkley, cut JT.
All right, all right. I was hoping I could convert you there for a second, but yeah, no, I agree. It is tough, and one thing I forgot to say about Barkley too is like that value isn't going to go down too much from now from a year from now, anyways, and that's why I said trade him later is because I think that value is going to remain pretty static and it's not going to be too dynamic. Now on to our last one here, my 3 guys. Normally we end up with 3 guys in the same position, but I decided to throw a curveball to you here, Zach. I went 3 guys in 3 different positions, all in the same range. But the reason I picked these 3 guys is they're all looking for redemption right now. They're coming off low points in their career and they're looking to ignite the fire again, and they were once fantasy stars. I don't want to say studs, but they were guys that people started in their fantasy teams and then have fallen down and aren't getting the start every week anymore. And so that's Najee Harris, RB for the Pittsburgh. I almost said Penguins there. Pittsburgh Steelers. His ADP is 68. DeAndre Hopkins, his ADP is 76, and he is a wide receiver for the Titans now, right? And
Yeah,
then
Tennessee.
yeah, and then Kyle Pitts at an ADP of 61, so the highest drafted out of these 3 guys for the Atlanta Falcons tight end.
Geez, really not giving me too much to pick from here, buddy. I'm gonna have to go with geez Louise. Probably keeping Pitts. No, maybe no, yeah, I'll keep Pitts. I'll trade Najee and I'll cut Nuke. I'll cut Hopkins. Uh, of those 3, I think Kyle Pitts has the most upside this year and going forward. So that's kind of been the curse of whoever drafted him in dynasty leagues, and then those that have drafted him in subsequent redraft leagues, where you're thinking like this is the year that they untap that potential, where you have truly a game breaking, game altering tight end. Haven't really quite seen that to this point, but maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year with Kirk Cousins and a better passing offense. a passing offense that utilizes skill players better than Arthur Smith did. So keeping Kyle Pitts. Going to trade Najee. Najee is really not a sexy player. He's not somebody that we expect to be top 5, top 10 of that running back position, but he is like a good running back too on a lot of teams, and that's nothing to sneeze at. So he is a useful piece in a fantasy roster, whether it's dynasty or redraft. And DeAndre Hopkins, he can still play. And we saw that last year, his first year there in Tennessee. He can still play. He is still somebody that you can play as a wide receiver 3 or a flex. Maybe not every week, but he's somebody that you can play and start on your roster. But he is getting older. And of those 3, I think he just has like the least value for your team and value on the trade market. So going to get rid of him.
Yeah, it's pretty chalk sticking to the ADP on that one too, with that.
Oh
Um,
yeah, didn't even notice
but
that, but yeah.
yeah, you know what? I agree with you too. Like Najee, you mentioned Arthur Smith with Pitts. He doesn't have him laying him down anymore. Najee, I'm just worried about that. Like Kyle Pitts, you probably invested high in him in your draft when you got him, and it's probably still you who owns him. Like you likely didn't trade him away because you're hoping for him to hit his potential. Whereas Najee Harris, you're kind of just trying to recoup your losses at this point, I think. Arthur Smith is a complete um just unknown, and you never know what's going to happen on his teams. Sure, Najee could probably have good weeks. He could have good performances. Arthur Smith has produced some good fantasy players, but you just don't know who it's going to be and when and stuff like that. Always keeping you guessing. So I don't want that. I'll trade it away to somebody who maybe thinks, Najee is going to reclaim his role here as the workhorse back in Pittsburgh from Jalen Warren. I just don't want to take that gamble. I'll recoup the losses there. Kyle Pitts, because of the upgrades, the grass is looking greener, everything's looking brighter. Might as well keep him. And then DeAndre Hopkins, he's still serviceable, but he's getting older, and it's getting harder and harder to start him. And you just don't want to be gambling every week with that in your starting lineup, even though you could flex him here and there, but that's not quite the same value as what you could get for Pitts or Najee anyway. So and that's it for the keep trade cut that we got going on here. Now
Oh boy, that was rough.
yeah.
You're
Oh,
like
yeah.
5, 4, 3.
Oh, yeah. Let's try again. Um, 5, 4. All right. So yeah, it's getting harder to start DeAndre Hopkins. Um, Especially when you think about how up and down it can be. It's a bit of a boom or bust situation, and maybe in best ball, Hopkins might be a good name to go after, but otherwise, like you're getting more value out of Pitts and Harris, I think, at this point, because it is a little bit more stable. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of Keep Trade Cut. That's all the guys that both of us brought into this one, and it was a fun time, Zach. So but we're moving on to ice cold hot takes here, and it is my turn. So JC is gonna cut in the drop here when he edits it through magic. All right, so my turn for ice cold hot take. I wanted to talk about this guy in the keep trade cut. I had one in the docket, and I was gonna do it, but then I was like, nope, I don't want to talk about him too much before my hot take. And I ended up having to a little bit before. I'm going Homer here. I'm going with the Vikings. Justin Jefferson is the topic of my hot take here. I am saying that Justin Jefferson is going to surpass 1,600 yards this year, provided no long-term injury, and reclaim his throne as a wide receiver 1. Not a wide receiver 1, the wide receiver one on the fantasy season this year. Now I know like people are getting a little skittish. He's probably the cheapest he's ever been since his rookie season in redraft and maybe even dynasty if you want to try and buy him because of the departure of Kirk Cousins and having we don't know between Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy or Nick Mullins throwing him the ball this season. But I think that Justin Jefferson has proven himself to be QB proof. Without Cousins last year, after Jefferson came back from injury, Cousins was out, and Jefferson still averaged over 100 yards a game. And that would put him on pace for 1,600 yards on a full season without Cousins. Um, Darnold is an upgrade to the backups that threw him the ball in the last few games last year. Like he had Josh Dobbs, he had Nick Mullins, he had another QB that I completely forget who it was now. But they weren't lighting the world on fire. Dobbs kind of crashed and burned. He only could really use his legs. Mullins is a gunslinger, but hey, he's still on the team. So worst case scenario, the if Mullins isn't the starting QB, that means the two guys ahead of him are better than him, meaning Jefferson should theoretically get more yards than he did with Nick Mullins. And like you look at the games, like Nick Mullins gave Justin Jefferson a 194 yard game last season in those last few games. So, like I think he's still gonna have a great fantasy season. He's QB proof, and like I I think that Sam is going to end up being the starting QB. But if he stinks, JJ is waiting in the wings. And like I said, Nick Mullins is ready to take shots. And then you look at the personnel around him. Addison is an upgrade to what Jefferson has been used to having across from him and should be better in year two. That means that teams are going to have to split their focus a little bit and not be able to strictly be on Jefferson all the time, double teaming him every single play. And hopefully the Vikings take advantage of that and hit him for big gainers whenever they decide to put a little bit of attention on Addison. And then Addison is going to force them to think about doing that and not have guys double teaming Jefferson as much and having more of uh, a balanced defense. And then you add in Hawk when he comes back to injury. It just opens it up a little bit more for Jefferson, makes life a little bit easier. Um, Even though Cousins isn't there, you got lots of weapons for whichever QB is in, and Jefferson is still going to eat. He's still the alpha. He's going to get the majority of the targets in that offense. But teams are going to get burnt if they take an eye off Addison and Hawkinson, and then Jefferson will burn them once they stop double teaming him. So I fully trust in Kevin O'Connell's offense. He is a great offensive mind, and he's going to figure out ways to get the ball moving down the field. And he is going to play with defenses and toy with defenses, and they're going to have trouble. They're going to have trouble reining in Jefferson. So yeah, that is my hot take. Zach, do you have a rebuttal to this?
Yeah, a little bit. You brought up some really good points. I think this hot take is as much to do with Jefferson as it is to do with JJ McCarthy. I am of the belief that this season is probably going to start with Darno, but it's going to end with JJ. I don't see how a team the caliber of the Vikings can possibly rely on Darno, who time and time again has proven he's not a starting NFL quarterback, at least not a quarterback that you want to rely on game in and game out for an entire season. So I think a team the caliber of the Vikings will be looking to get McCarthy starting sooner than later. And with that in mind, I went back and looked at the most passing yards for rookie quarterbacks. And the quarterback that had the most passing yards his rookie season was Andrew Luck back in 2012. And that year, his number one receiver was Reggie Wayne. And on that season, he had 1,355 receiving yards. So, um, that's definitely not a bad season by any stretch. And that is over 12 years ago. So we're looking at, the NFL has changed a little bit over that time span, but we're looking at the greatest rookie passing season and what they were able to accomplish. So for you to have 1,600 yards as your benchmark, your threshold for JJ to surpass, for Jefferson to surpass, sorry,
Jay
that's
Jetta.
quite an ambitious target, I think.
Yeah, and you know what? That's what makes it hot. But you know what? Like I am more on the side that I think Darnold is gonna be the guy moving forward, and he probably won't start JJ unless the Vikings have fallen into a hole. I think they're really trying to nurture him and trying to make sure he gets his footing. And but at the same time, it is a competitive team, so they do want to win games. So like if JJ is truly head and shoulders above Sam Darnold, then they're going to start him. But that's great news for me in this hot take. If I was confident in Darnold being able to put up those numbers with JJ or Justin Jefferson, and then JJ is that much better than him, and I believe then he would be able to put up those numbers. But you know that is a good point, Zach. It is tough, but rarely do we see rookie QBs coming in with these types of weapons around them. And it is if it was to happen, if this was a season for that big of a receiving total for a receiver with a rookie QB to beat that Andrew Luck benchmark there or watermark, this I believe would be the perfect storm in order to make that happen. But yeah, let's see what happens when it all goes down here in the season. I'm excited. I'm so excited for this season, Zach. I don't know. It's gonna be great. New things happening for both our teams. Turning over new leaves with our quarterbacks. I guess you a little sooner than you guys maybe have had hoped after you drafted Mac Jones, but it's an optimistic time to be for the Patriots and the Vikings. So I hope you're as excited as me, but I guess you guys are a little bit more used to winning Super Bowls than we are.
Yeah, it's an odd time, I guess, for fans of the Patriots that are kind of my age. This is since I've been a fan, kind of like at the bottom of their success here, but like you said, still very exciting. I think Drake May has a lot of people in Pats Nation very excited, uh, not only for this season, um, but definitely for the future. Kind of like you said, similar to the Vikings, I think the Pats, I think their best interest would be to nurture Drake May and kind of bring him along slowly. No need to throw him into the fire right away. Like we're not competing for a championship this year, so no need to throw him out there. Let him sit, let him learn a little bit, and then when he is fully ready, then put him in. That would be my hope, my wish, how I would do it.
And with both of us kind of hoping that our teams do this and kind of thinking that they probably will. Do you think we're starting to see that change in the NFL? Because for a while there, it was like rookie QBs were immediately starting all the time, like those first round QBs. But with after seeing the success of Patty Mahomes, and the way he was nurtured into the league. Do you think teams are going to start doing that more now, and we're going to see a shift in how NFL teams handle their first round QBs?
I think it might be a case by case basis. Like look at this past season. You had a team in the Carolina Panthers that just absolutely bottomed out, and they were a very bad team. And they go young, one overall, and they start him off the hop, and it's not a good situation. One of the worst offensive lines in the league. Certainly one of the worst receiving groups in the league. Um, and then not a very explosive or productive run game. Not set up at all to succeed in his first year. But then, the pick after him, you have the Texans, who had been near the bottom for a few years now, or a few years at that point, and they were able to put together the pieces around Stroud, and he started off Jump Street as well, week one, and he had a very successful season. He had the third most passing yards of any rookie quarterback in the league history. So, uh, two two teams that I think were structured and built very differently. And we could see that the one team had no infrastructure, nothing around him, nothing to support him. And Young had a terrible season. And then on the other hand, you had a team with the infrastructure, with the supporting cast around him that was able to support him. And he had one of the all time great rookie seasons. So it probably really depends on the structure of the team. And like looking at our two teams, I think the Pats are closer to the Panthers than they are to the Texans. Um, and I think the Vikings are a lot closer to the Texans than they are to the Panthers.
I would agree with that. That's a astute observation there, Zach. But yeah, it probably is a case by case, and NFL GMs are definitely going to have to keep watching and kind of see what their situation is and how it best suits their QB that they draft. And you got to think they're thinking about that, but you never know. Sometimes you'd be surprised people in those positions don't necessarily always consider every angle. And it's funny how that works sometimes. But anyways, that brings us to the end of the episode here, Zach. I had a lot of fun hosting again. I gotta push Jordan. Always gotta try and one up him when I host and be the better host than him, so that the next time when he comes back and he can host, he's even better than before. Gotta push him, man. Gotta push him. Otherwise, he might become complacent, and then one day I'm hosting every single episode. Who wants that? I don't know. You got anything here to add, Zach, before we sign off?
No, just well done here on your hosting, and lots of fun.
Well, thank you, Zach. And like always, everyone, follow all our socials, keep track of it. Jordan has great visuals that he puts up for us. I always enjoy looking at them. He's really talented at that, and so keep watching them. And the fantasy season is going to be starting to really roll here. We're getting into redraft season here, especially with best ball. So get out there, start watching everything, getting all your information, and summer camps will start before we even know it, and we'll be watching all that news and hopefully getting an idea of what's going to happen this fantasy season a little more. But like always, talk soon and take care, everybody. All right, stop recording.